Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Two women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely
You
important.
can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead.
So, do you want to dive into our first ever topic? I feel like we're going to also learn a lot of things that we did not know about each other, which is exciting.
So, do you want to start about what I was thinking where we should start is in college and high school, and where did you get the inspiration for getting into advertising and marketing? You know, was it in high school? Was it in college? Was it not till after graduation? Where was your sparks of where you kind of started to feel like this is the area that you wanted to succeed in?
You know what? That's a great question. You know why? Because I feel like I'm one of those weirdos. Because I always wanted to be in marketing. I was doing like marketing classes when I was in 9th grade.
Really?
And part of DECA.
Oh, you were a DECA girl.
I was. And I don't meet a lot of people like that. I mean, a lot of people that I work in marketing, you know, kind of went through college, maybe had business degrees, but not a marketing focus, and are some of the best marketers I know, you know? So I always am like fascinated by the answer to this question. How about you?
You know, when I was a child, I wanted to be an actress, actually. And I was in young people's theater for years after years. And I did lots of theater. And
Really?
Yeah, I know. It's a surprise. And one day when I was in elementary school, my dad asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I said, I wanted to be an actress. And he said, well, you're not going to make any money as an actress. 1 in a million people make it. So you should come up with something else. So he destroyed my dream right then and there, which is fine because I realized that's not an area that I would have excelled at. But I think there's parts of acting in what we do in terms of presenting and coming up with ideas. So I think there's elements that I took from that. But for me, the spark didn't come till freshman year of college. I went to University of Colorado at Boulder, and they had a school of journalism, and I decided to join. You didn't join the journalism school until sophomore year, so you applied freshman year. And I applied because I started to get interested. I thought maybe I wanted to be a broadcaster, acting to broadcasting.
Perfect segue, yeah.
And, you know, I started to talk to people about it and interview people who were older than me. And what they told me was in broadcasting, what they do is pick the top 10 people in the class. And out of that, they end up picking the best looking. And which was a little intimidating. And then also you end up, you know, working in Iowa or Illinois in very small markets and working your way up. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe reporting, because I love to write. And so I got in the journalism school and I started taking all these basic classes. And then I started taking kind of an advertising 101 class. And I realized this has everything I possibly want to do in it. It has writing, it has presentation, it has strategies and concept and the creative side of things. And I realized that advertising was it. And that's what I wanted to do. And I was a part of the AAF program that they did in college. The national
super cool
competition. Did you do that?
No, you know why? Because I actually never did advertising in college.
Oh.
I did just marketing. So I was an AMA, but always wished that I had done AAF because they have that cool competition, right?
It was a fabulous program. At the year that we did it, it was the Hearst Corporation sponsoring it. So we got to come up with a magazine. And that was super fun to learn about the magazine world. And we ended up getting second place. bummed we didn't get first, but it was a really fun experience for me. And that kind of cemented the idea that I wanted to be in advertising. And for me, I knew then by junior year that that's what I wanted to do. And I got an internship in Minneapolis at BBD&O. And my dad had an old buddy of his from college, and I lived with him for the summer and his family. And I worked at BBD&O, and I had a fabulous time learning about advertising. And then senior year, I'm a little older than you. So when I graduated, it was the Gulf War, and it was kind of a bad time period to be looking for a job, spring break. But I was I did a market trip in spring break where I interviewed. I said, okay, if I'm going to be in advertising, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be in the top markets. And at the time, Minneapolis was hot, but I didn't want to, there was Fallon McGillicuddy and all those old school fabulous ad agencies, but I didn't want to live in Minneapolis after the summer there. I liked it, but it wasn't the major market I wanted to be in. So I decided to interview in New York, Chicago, and LA. And I did that spring break of my senior year, and I ended up getting job offers in all 3 cities.
Oh my gosh.
For entry-level positions. And I decided, if I'm going to make $18,000 a year, which is what they paid back then, and I think that's hard for students to imagine now. I think they make 3-4 times that now as an entry-level position.
Oh, well, when I interviewed for Ogilvy before I graduated college, I mean, I think that they were offering for New York City, I think they were offering like $30,000 a year.
Wow. Well,
so, I mean, that's more than 18, but like, if you think about that in New York City, even at the time, like I would have had to like live with 6 people in a studio to afford being in advertising.
And that was my decision as to why I didn't go to New York. Cause I thought if I'm going to make that little amount of money, I'd rather live at the beach. And so I moved to LA and took that job. What about you?
Oh man. Well, as I said, I never took advertising classes. I was much more into marketing, but kind of something that you said made me think about, like in retrospect, a lot of my jobs were sales.
Interesting.
A lot of my internships were sales, and I didn't really necessarily like sales. Didn't feel very comfortable in sales. But in retrospect, gosh, thank goodness I had all that sales training, because kind of like acting, I feel like that's all I do. I'm selling myself, I'm selling my agency, I'm selling for my clients. And even though, both of us work in that nonprofit space and we're not necessarily selling a product, we're definitely selling the core narrative of our clients to donors or members or constituents. So like sales, like huge. But I wanted to say like, I like so admire that, because I like have these dreams of like, what if I had done like the big advertising thing, and what if I had really pursued going to New York? But I really just wanted to stay at home, near my family.
Where were you?
Here in DC.
Okay.
I kind of, when I look back at my experience, so I was huge into internships. My first internship in college after my freshman year, I was like the youngest. So they put me in the sales team. And of course I felt kind of gypped because I wasn't with the marketing kids.
Yeah.
But being with the sales folks was so much more fun, and got immersed into that. And then I went after that to, had more of a marketing role. I was an intern at AOL. Oh. AOL we got 30 million dial-up subscribers, if you can remember that.
I still have an AOL account.
Yeah, and so my department, actually, we were the ones that were in charge of doing creative testing on the CDs that got mailed out.
Oh my God.
I gave you, 500 free hours or whatever.
That's a great story.
I know. It was so.
I still have one of those somewhere.
Oh, I have some. It was the greatest. Being part of AOL and in the .com, boom was so awesome. And then Drum roll, I got an internship at Williams Whittle.
Oh.
Where I ended up working for many, many years. For those of you who do not know us, and now Kelly works at Williams Whittle. So that is our connection.
Was that in college or after college?
No, I was 20 years old.
So in college.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, kind of my path there was I was involved in AMA. I went to this career day. And Ron Owens of LM&O.
I know Ron very well.
Yeah. He's a fixture in DC, and obviously anyone who knows LM&O has a very successful history in the ad biz. He said, if you want to work in advertising in DC, go to the Book of Lists. So I went to the Book of Lists and I emailed every single person on it saying, I want an internship. And one of the people that interviewed me ended up being my mentor and lifelong bosom buddy.
Who was that?
Martha Wilcox.
Fabulous.
She worked at Williams Whittle, and I just had such a great experience. And I think that's what catapulted me into advertising, because she was able to give me that hands-on view into advertising. And quite frankly, there was 3 of us interns, and Rob Whittle tapped us to help with all sorts of new business pitches, which is of course super fun, you know, when you're young and you have no responsibilities and you get to think of fun out of the box ideas and go do man on the street interviews and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess that's how I got started. I feel like the takeaway from that is like, and you also said this, is that asking for advice, you know, like Ron Owens. And I told him, like, on LinkedIn one day, like, listening to that advice of others when they impart it was really helpful for me in my career.
Absolutely.
Sounds like it was for you too.
And so you stayed at Williams Whittle after college at an entry-level job.
No, so I went back into sales.
Oh.
So, you know, I decided that I really felt like sales was the place for me. And so I went and sold high-end real estate.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, and did not like it. I think maybe I would like it now, but as a, you know, newbie graduate of college, not for me. And then after that I became a corporate concierge for a while. And then Martha called me and would not let me say no to coming and working with her. And we worked together for almost a decade.
Oh my gosh, 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years at Williams Whittle?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then she left and I obviously stayed for a little while longer, but I mean, that was the other thing for me was, my mom had told me a long, long time ago, like, to find a mentor. And I know that there's lots of programs out there, especially in the DC area, like American Marketing Association offers them. I've seen in a bunch of like Facebook groups, like people that are starting up mentoring programs, and like, it's totally worth the investment. You know, like, I am literally indebted for the rest of my life to Martha, because she actually would put down her paper and pen and look away from her computer and actually teach me things.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And give me advice that I still follow today.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, that was kind of my path. How about, tell me about what happened or what decisions you made after you were an associate in LA.
Well, so
where'd you go from there?
It's very similar to you in terms of finding a mentor. So the reason why I went to LA, not only because of the beach, was actually because Gray Advertising in Los Angeles at the time had an account management training program. And I knew
Oh.
I wanted to be in account management. And it was the only account management training program that existed at the time. In fact, I don't know of any other agency that's had one really since. And it was a very organized program. And there were probably 5 to 8 account management trainees is what we were called. And so what we did as a trainee is we did job rotation in each department. So I was an assistant research. I was a research associate for the first 6 months that I was there. And this is pre-internet. So I got to go to LexisNexis training to learn how to use LexisNexis to do research for new.
Wait, on a CD-ROM?
Yeah, it was these old programs that had the computer paper that made a lot of noise and went up into the air and you had to rip it off. And so that was way back in the day. And then after that, I was assistant media buyer for Lucky Stores. So I got to use the old computers and input the buys and do the make goods. And then from there, I was a traffic manager in the traffic department, which I loved. And I was working on Caesar's Palace and Caesar's Tahoe. And that's where I met my first 2 major mentors in my career. Ben Worthing was the head of the traffic department at that time. And Arlene Vizina was the head of production at that time. And they were fabulous mentors to me and taught me everything I needed to know about print production. I mean, I literally toured every print production facility. I learned the basics of making a brochure, of an outdoor board, et cetera. And Ben used to take me out with his old buddies back in the day to have these nice high-end lunches at Gray. And then from there,
isn't it sad that like freshly new to advertising people, I feel like so many of them will never like go to a printing press. They'll never understand what a blue line is.
Yeah.
Like that is such an art that is so different from those times now.
And the way they used to build ads back in the day, you know, nothing was digital at the time. And
the typesetters.
Yeah. And so it was a lot to learn and I enjoyed that time. And from there, I got promoted through the program, you get promoted to assistant account executive and then you're out of the program. And part of the program is every week, different people teach you things. You have to read a book a week. That's where I got addicted, or book a month. That's where I got addicted to starting to read for education. We actually had to write a book review, a book report and hand it in. Wow. It was graded. And then you had to learn about presentation skills and then they would record you and give
Whoa.
There was all sorts of things through the program, but it was really helpful. And then I got promoted to assistant account executive on Carl's Jr. Fast Food. And what was great about that job is I managed all the collateral because everyone wanted to do the television and no one cared about collateral. And they had 650 stores across California at the time. And so they wanted to do this huge promotion. It was a multi-million-dollar promotion at the stores. And I had an art director draw all of the interior of the store, the exterior of the store, and the drive-through. And we put all the collateral pieces and all the translates and the Duratrans on a piece of paper and directed the way it was going to look and presented it to the client and got it approved. And it was the biggest promotion they had ever done in their history, which was so much fun because no one cared of what I was doing. They only cared about the TV because that was glamorous, right? So I got to do a lot more fun stuff. And then 6 months later, I was ready to be promoted to account executive. And I wrote a report, an overview of here's what I've accomplished in the last 6 months. And I presented it to Larry Varnes, the VP, and here's what I've done. And he read it and said, I don't see why I would promote you to account executive. You're right, you deserve it. And so
what agency was that again?
Gray Advertising.
Right.
The agency doesn't exist anymore down in LA, which is very, very sad.
I know.
But yeah, and I stayed there, on Carl's Jr. Fast Food. And about a year later, Larry Varnes called me into his office. And this is the funniest story of my career to me and the most exciting. And he said to me, I was 24 and he said, I need an emergency account executive in the San Francisco office. Would you go to San Francisco for the summer and we'll put you up in a hotel and pay for all your meals and stay there for the summer and work as an account executive? And I'm like, sure. So I stayed in a nice hotel with the view of the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. I had meals out every night because I had a per diem of $30. At that time, $30 a per diem per day was insane. So I would have these nice meals on Gray Advertising's dime, and I worked at Gray San Francisco, and I loved it. And they actually, after the summer, offered me the job to work there full time, and I said no.
You wanted to go back to LA?
Well, at the time, LA was, a much bigger ad market. San Francisco ad market had not really blossomed yet, and there were bigger accounts. And so I went back to LA, and a couple of months later, they came back to me and said, are you sure? And I said, I think I'd like to go. I'd like to try it. And so they paid for me to move to San Francisco at 25. Wow. And so that was an amazing experience to be able to move up to San Francisco on another company's dime at that young age and to take that risk. And it ended up being the best thing that I could have ever done.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like when Martha called me to try to get me to come work with her, I was happy. I loved this corporate concierge job that I was in. It was like sales and marketing and entrepreneurial. And so I originally told her no. And then like a month later, she's like, would you reconsider? And like, I really thought about it. And I thought about my life like long-term, and I thought about the mentor thing. And I also finally decided yes. And it was also the best decision I ever made.
It's interesting that happened to both of us.
I know.
Life doesn't usually knock on your door twice in that way.
I know, right? But you know what? You said something, to go back to something that you said, which I also think is a super huge, important thing, especially for people coming into the marketing, especially the advertising business in DC, right? Which is not like the ad biz in New York, right?
Yeah.
People should be asking the questions when they interview about training, right? Because in DC, I feel like a lot of the younger, more independent agencies may not put as high a value on training new employees. And I think for both of us, it was so pivotal. When I went into sales, my first job, they had a 6-month training program. There was like 15 other people in my class, so to speak. And we had like lots of retreats where we got sales training. And it was really elite. And like that investment in me as a new person in the working world was really valuable. So like I would say, and you tell me how you view it, but I would say that for a young person interviewing, they should ask questions about what type of training they're going to get, how long that training period will go on. And even if it's not something super formal, they should really like dive in to understand like how much are they going to be thrown into the deep end, which has its benefits, but how much of an investment are they going to feel once they've been on the job for a while? Because I think that's something that's, and maybe I'm just speaking too specifically about the DC market because it is so different, but I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, no, I don't think it's market specific. I think it's like any career. You need to learn every aspect of the job.
Yeah.
And, back then digital didn't exist. Okay. So you have advertising production, and there's a lot that goes on with production.
Right.
Production, broadcast production,
media buying,
all the basics on that. Then there is traffic. Traffic was a big deal back then. And traffic is really making sure that there's no mistakes on your ads. And we could do a whole seminar on mistakes made. And that would be a really entertaining one because I usually start with that with some of my younger interns. Don't make the same mistakes I did. And it's all about proofreading, right?
Yes, we should do that. We should do an episode on the top 10 mistakes.
Oh, I got some doozies.
Yeah, would be great.
So there's that. There's, account management. What is the basics of account management? New business, its own entity. How do you sell a new business? How is it written? How is it drafted? How do you do an RFP? There is, what am I missing? Creative. I mean, the basics of creative, copywriting versus art direction. How do they work together? So there's so many different elements of advertising, just the advertising side, not even the marketing side of things, that you need to learn in order to be a strong account person. Because if you don't know all the different elements and how they come together, money tracking, budgeting, all these sort of things for accounting. And that's why I was really, pleased that I had all that information up front, because then you're really a well-rounded account person and you know all the aspects, and they can let you go, because the whole point is you want to be independent. You want to be able to be that account executive that runs her own show. And there may be certain people above you, but the knowledge that you have, the quicker you can make it up the ladder, so to speak. So I think
kudos,
super important.
kudos to you for creating that and at the agency now. I think that's awesome.
Well, all I had to do was replicate what Gray Advertising did back in the day. So they were
replicating the best.
that made it easy. But I wanted to kind of just quickly go over the rest of my career path, because it was very strange if you think about it going back. And I think there's some lessons learned there. I mean, once I was in San Francisco, I worked for a bunch of different boutique agencies. I knew that I was better in a smaller boutique environment. I'm not a politics kind of person. And so I love the smaller boutique firms, and getting a chance to, have greater access to the accounts, and not having so many different layers, and greater access to the clients and that knowledge base. And so after working for a couple different agencies, I realized I was in San Francisco in the 90s, and the dot-com boom was starting, just like at AOL for you. And I needed technology experience. And so I went to an agency specifically to gain technology experience. And you're going to love this link. I worked on Netcom.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so Netcom was the techies internet service provider with the anti-AOL. So I worked on the launch of Netcom back in the day.
Wow.
I know. And so that's funny. And then from there, just the dot-com heyday happened. And one of our clients was a dot-com. It was a sports website. And they asked me to be, they were my client, and they asked me to be director of marketing. And I took that job. They weren't very happy with the agency, but I thought, this is my opportunity to go client side and see what it's like. Ooh. The only negative was that it was in Sacramento, and I lived in San Francisco, and that's an hour and a half to an hour 45-minute drive each way.
Ooh.
So that was crazy. And I did that for about 9 months. And then one of the founders started another dot-com back in San Francisco and said, hey, will you come and manage this as not just head of marketing, but will you find an office for me and open it? And so I had to literally go and find office space and find a location, which we did right near the Transamerica Tower, and open up this office of this dot-com. And so that really kind of started the idea of, entrepreneurship and, learning from the ground up. How do you get a phone line set up?
Yeah.
How do you find the desk? How do you do all this sort of stuff? And then from there, I went to a couple different dot-coms, and the story got even funnier because I landed at a dot-com called heretolisten.com. And it was an online therapy website. It was backed by real licensed therapists. And the idea was like online chat with therapists. It was an idea that was 15 years at the time. People do that now all the time. But it was a big kind of master idea then. Of course, it didn't succeed, but I helped come up with the tagline, which was therapy from your couch. So that resonates.
I mean, wow. I'm sure it was a hard sell back then. It probably, it took decades for people to start to be comfortable to do that.
Well, that's what's interesting. There were so many ideas back then, like pets.com and things that just didn't work because the world wasn't ready for them yet.
Yeah.
But the best thing that came out of that experience is I met my husband at this online therapy website. He was the head of content and I was the head of marketing. And we dated for 3 months. And then he got a call saying, from National Geographic saying, will you go to Afghanistan and do a documentary with Sebastian Junger? And he went to Afghanistan, and 2 months later, he moved to DC. And so we did long distance for a year, which is why, and then 9/11 happened. And the bottom of the market fell out in San Francisco. I did do a stint over at KLH Williams, which is an African-American agency. And I worked on the Nissan Motor Corporation account, which I loved as well. And then I decided to look for a job in DC. I looked in New York too. And I got a job at Choice Hotels, and they paid for, because I was the only person that had both digital experience and traditional advertising, which was really hard to find at the time on the East Coast. So they paid for me to move from San Francisco to DC. And I moved across the street from my husband because I wasn't going to move in with him because we weren't married.
Wait, so which one's better, East Coast or West Coast? Are you an East Coast girl or a West Coast girl?
Oh, I am so much a West Coast girl, and I've been in DC for over 20 years, and I've been with my husband for 20 years, married for 17, and I always tell him that I moved to DC for him, and I'm bitter about it, and I will remain bitter about it for many years, but I've adjusted to it here, and it's a great place to raise your kids. It's a good market. The market's changed significantly over the last 20 years. Yeah. And so I'm in a different place in my life, and San Francisco's too expensive now. We couldn't afford to live there. So
I don't think I could ever live on the West Coast. I think I'm just way too East Coast.
Really?
Yeah.
You never know until you get placed in the environment, and it's almost like starting over, really, because you don't have a network. Wow. And you have to build it back up again.
Wow. Wait, so how many years did you do client side?
Oh, goodness. Well,
I have had 0.
Oh, well.
I mean, my first 2 jobs out of college, I mean, I guess I was technically client side, but I wasn't, I was in sales. So it was different, than managing marketing or advertising in-house. So yeah, I always feel like I'm going to be an agency girl for life.
Well, it's funny because I went back and forth. I also went and did client side when my kids were young. I worked at National Council on Aging.
Oh, okay.
And I had this amazing boss, Donna Phillips Mason, who had children that were my age and grandchildren. And she let all these women work for her that all worked like after 8 p.m. And
that's right. You were telling me about this. Genius.
Fabulous. And so I got to stay home with the kids during the day and then work at night. So I probably spent client side maybe 5 to 8 years. And then I got a call from Alberto Gonzalez, who used to work at Gray Advertising and started his own agency, Pulsar. And they were based in LA, but they had an office in DC. And
oh yeah, I've heard of that.
And so
they're still going strong, aren't they?
Going strong, and they specialize in transportation. And so I started working I wasn't ready to go back because the kids were young, but Alberto convinced me, and I went to the DC office, and I stayed in advertising ever since. And so that's been since 2009, and so that's been for 10, 11 years. And I love advertising, so I'm happy I came back, but I'm glad I had both experiences.
Yeah, well, for all of our new listeners to this brand new podcast, there you go. Like both of us, I feel like have had a lot of similar road to where we've gone, how we've gotten to where we are, but then some differences too, like I've never done client side, whereas you have.
So what are your takeaways for and advice for young people who are just starting? We talked about the mentoring.
Yeah, mentor, huge. However way you can get it, right? If it's someone that's in your company, I think you can look for something outside, especially in these days, I had a business coach for the past 6 months, which has been, 6 months before coronavirus. Which was super helpful, it wasn't like mentor, but like that coaching style and having someone to help you along and handhold, I think is super important. 2 kind of goes along with that. I think like asking for advice. Absolutely. Right? So like a lot of the things that we hear about, and like I'm a millennial, so I feel like I can say this, like, that millennials are overconfident, or millennials, think they know everything. And I don't think that they necessarily do. I think that it's a confidence thing. It's like let me not be vulnerable, because then I might not look smart enough, or I might not get a promotion, or, whatever that vulnerability might set them up for. But I really encourage everyone to ask for advice. I think that everyone loves to give advice. Yeah. So once you open that door, you actually aren't really, you are being vulnerable, but you're going to get a lot of value out of it. And you're also going to build some rapport with whoever you're asking the advice from. You also mentioned a couple of, little things in your story about, asking for advice. So I think that we also have that in common. And then my last one is like, trust your gut.
Oh, perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Like we both talked about that, with the whole, like saying no, then thinking about it, then eventually saying yes. And like, I think, maybe we won't get into it today, but like, the career path of becoming, once we had our feet, kind of more firmly, on the foundation of our careers, then kind of venturing into motherhood.
Yes. Another topic.
Really, I feel like makes you have to trust your gut, because you're making a lot more decisions that affect a lot more facets of your life at that point. And what are you going to fall back on?
Yeah. Well,
right?
Save that for another topic, right?
Absolutely. I think we have probably more to talk about in terms of like,
yes.
How do you really navigate that time in your life when you're career driven, when you're family driven, when you're having that shift, just internally, personally? I think we have lots of advice to impart there.
Absolutely.
What about your other advice?
Well, I think I'll just close with, you said everything that needed to be said. I would close with, it's not a ladder. It's kind of like a jungle gym. And I've heard this analogy in terms of your career. Yeah. You're not going to always go up, especially if you're going to be a mom. Sometimes you're going to take a step down.
Totally.
And a couple steps over to the side, and then maybe you make a big jump to the top.
Yes.
And I think you have to be open to not being singularly focused. Life's going to throw things at you that you're going to want to change your life and your career based on those things, and be able to customize your career because of where you are in your life. And so you're gonna, in advertising, you're gonna lose your job. You're gonna get laid off at least once, and you have to go through that because accounts are lost. And so
yeah,
a big lesson as well. And I think that resilience is really what the biggest thing that you need to be in this business and stay in the business and be able to dust yourself off and get back up again.
I agree. I also think that in 2020, it's taught me that, you can still be ambitious while not climbing the ladder straight up.
Absolutely.
And instead, navigating that jungle gym, right?
Well, let's end there for this series.
Awesome.
And we've got lots more to come.
Tune in.
Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Callie.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a podcast review or send us a message at twomarketingmoms.com. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.